What if I told you that behind heavy metal's loudest anthems and craziest stage moments were some of the darkest addictions the world has ever seen? These rockers lived fast, played harder, and chased highs that nearly destroyed them. From backstage binges to near-death overdoses, their lives became a blur of chaos, fame, and pain. Some managed to claw their way back from the edge, while others couldn't escape the demons that fame brought. Here are the worst junkies in heavy metal history. Ozzy Osbourne. When people talk about the worst junkies in heavy metal history, Ozzy Osbourne's name almost always tops the list. His story isn't just about wild nights and bad choices. It's about how fame and addiction collided in the most explosive way possible. In the late 70s and 80s, Ozzy lived life in fast forward. Cocaine, alcohol, pills. If it could knock him out, he took it. Bandmates couldn't keep up, and even he didn't remember half the things he did. Once he got so high, he tried to strangle his wife, Sharon, not even realizing who she was. Another time, he infamously urinated on a monument while blackout drunk, getting himself banned from an entire city. Every record, every tour came with chaos. He was fired from Black Sabbath because of his drug use, yet somehow that only made his solo career explode. Fans saw him as unstoppable, a living rock god who couldn't be destroyed no matter how much poison he put in his body. Doctors warned him that his system was failing, but Ozzy just kept going, fueled by madness and music. His addiction should have ended him long ago, yet he became a walking contradiction, a man too wild to die. Even after countless rehabs, relapses, and breakdowns, Ozzy kept rising back, proving that the Prince of Darkness wasn't just a stage name. He was heavy metal's most unbreakable survivor, wrapped in chaos, fire, and pure rebellion. Nikki Sixx. Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue wasn't just addicted to heroin, he was practically married to it. His entire world revolved around the next fix, and his story became one of the darkest in heavy metal history. During the band's wildest years in the 80s, fame, money, and drugs all blurred together. He overdosed so many times that even his bandmates lost count. One night in 1987, Nikki was found lifeless after a heroin binge. Paramedics rushed in, injected him with adrenaline, and brought him back from the dead, literally. When he woke up in the hospital, tubes in his arms, he ripped them out and went straight home to use again. That's how deep his addiction ran. For Nikki, heroin wasn't just a drug, it was a monster that ruled his life. He once locked himself in his mansion for days, surrounded by syringes, convinced that no one cared if he lived or died. But his near-death experience became the turning point. He eventually wrote the Heroin Diaries, exposing every ugly detail of his addiction to warn others. Through music, therapy, and time, he rebuilt himself piece by piece. Today, Nikki Sixx stands as one of the few heavy metal junkies who escaped hell and lived to talk about it. His story is proof that even in the darkest corners of addiction, redemption isn't impossible. It's just painfully heroic. Lemmy Kilmister. Lemmy Kilmister from Motorhead was a different kind of junkie. He didn't try to hide it, deny it, or glamorize it. He simply lived it, full throttle. While most rock stars burned out, Lemmy made chaos his normal. For decades, his bloodstream was practically a cocktail of Jack Daniels and amphetamines. He once said he'd been doing speed every day since the 70s, and somehow he wasn't exaggerating. His lifestyle would have killed almost anyone else, but Lemmy kept performing like it was his oxygen. On stage, he was a legend, gravelly voice, roaring bass, and a presence that could shake any crowd. Off stage, his body was a battlefield. Doctors told him to stop drinking, so he switched from whiskey to vodka, still with Coke, of course. When his health began to fail, he brushed it off and kept touring. He even had a slot machine installed in his favorite bar so he could gamble while drinking. Lemmy's addiction didn't come from weakness. It came from living by his own rules. He didn't care about fame or image. He cared about rock and roll. Even when his heart was giving out, he refused to quit. In his final days, he was still surrounded by friends, music, and the same hard life that built his legend. Lemmy never pretended to be clean. He was chaos in human form, a heavy metal junkie who turned destruction into his signature style. Dave Mustaine. Dave Mustaine's story is the perfect mix of talent, rage, and self-destruction. Before he became the frontman of Megadeth, he was kicked out of Metallica for his drinking and drug use. That rejection pushed him into a spiral that defined much of his early career. Heroin, alcohol, and endless anger followed him like shadows. Every concert, every recording session was powered by adrenaline, resentment, and chemicals. For years, he lived on the edge, furious at the world and lost in addiction. At his worst, Dave's body started breaking down. He overdosed multiple times, wrecked relationships, and nearly lost everything he had built. Rehab didn't always work, but each relapse taught him something. He realized that if he didn't change, he'd end up another forgotten rock casualty. So he fought back. Through faith, therapy, and a brutal will to survive, he cleaned up and rebuilt his life. By the early 2000s, he wasn't just sober, he was focused. He turned Megadeth into one of the most respected metal bands in the world. Even after nerve damage nearly ended his career, he trained his hand back into shape. Dave's transformation from a broken addict to a driven survivor became one of metal's most inspiring comebacks. Among heavy metal junkies, few ever escaped the fire, but Mustaine walked through it and came out stronger than ever. Slash, the legendary guitarist from Guns N' Roses, lived like every day was his last, and several times it nearly was. His signature top hat and Les Paul guitar became symbols of rock and roll rebellion, but behind the fame, Slash was battling a dangerous addiction to heroin and alcohol that almost killed him. In the early 90s, his lifestyle spiraled out of control. He was drinking by the gallon, smoking constantly, and using drugs just to function. During one hotel stay, his heart literally stopped for 8 minutes after a heroin overdose. Paramedics revived him, but most people thought he wouldn't last another year. Even after that, Slash didn't immediately quit. He called it just another close call and went back to the stage as if nothing had happened. That's how deep addiction ran in heavy metal's bloodline. It felt normal. But years later, his body began to collapse under the pressure. He was diagnosed with heart failure, and doctors told him he'd be dead in days if he didn't change. That was the wake-up call that finally hit him hard. Slash went through detox, got clean, and rebuilt himself from the ground up. He traded chaos for creativity, proving that even the most reckless junkie can rewrite their story. Today, when Slash walks on stage, it's not just about the music. It's about survival, a reminder that he once danced with death and somehow lived to play another solo. Phil Anselmo. Phil Anselmo, the voice behind Pantera's aggressive sound, became one of heavy metal's most tragic cautionary tales. His journey into addiction started not with fame, but with pain, literally. Years of wild performances left him with chronic back issues, and he turned to painkillers to keep performing. But what began as prescription use quickly spiraled into a deadly romance with heroin. He'd take pills before shows, shoot up after, and pretend he was fine while his body slowly gave up on him. During Pantera's peak, Phil's addiction became impossible to ignore. His behavior grew erratic, his voice changed, and paranoia took over his mind. In 1996, he overdosed on heroin and flatlined for several minutes before being revived by paramedics. The band was shaken, but Phil still refused to accept how close he came to death. Fans noticed the decline, missed shows, angry rants, and tension that eventually tore Pantera apart. For years, Phil battled his demons privately, trying to break free while carrying guilt and pain from his past. Rehab, reflection, and age finally helped him pull away from the edge. Though his voice still carries the grit of those dark days, he's learned to live with his scars rather than hide them. Phil Anselmo's story reminds the world that heavy metal's loudest screams sometimes come from the deepest pain, and surviving them takes more strength than any stage performance ever could. Layne Staley. Layne Staley, the haunting voice of Alice in Chains, wasn't just a heavy metal junkie. He became the face of what addiction can truly destroy. His voice could shake souls, filled with pain and beauty that no one else could match. But behind that sound was a man slowly being eaten alive by heroin. Layne's struggle began in the early 90s, right when fame hit its peak. His songs spoke of darkness, death, and despair, not just as lyrics, but as a reflection of his life. As addiction took over, Layne began disappearing from the public eye. He grew thinner, quieter, and more distant. Friends tried to help, but he shut them out completely. By the late 90s, he was living alone in his Seattle apartment, surrounded by drug paraphernalia, rarely answering the phone. His bandmates hadn't seen him in years. When his body was finally found in 2002, he had been dead for 2 weeks. That's how far isolation had taken him. Layne's music told the truth before anyone realized it. Songs like Down in a Hole and Nutshell were cries for help in plain sight. His addiction wasn't glamorous or rebellious. It was lonely, quiet, and heartbreaking. Among the worst junkies in heavy metal, Layne's story remains one of the saddest because his talent was limitless. But heroin stole everything before he could escape it. His voice still echoes today, reminding fans of a man who sang his pain until it silenced him forever. Kurt Cobain. Kurt Cobain wasn't just the frontman of Nirvana. He was the symbol of an entire generation's rebellion. But behind the fame and fame-shattering music, he was trapped in a losing battle with heroin addiction. For Kurt, drugs weren't just an escape from pressure. They were a way to quiet the constant noise in his head. From chronic stomach pain to depression, he turned to heroin to cope, and soon it became the center of his world. By the time Nirvana exploded globally, Kurt was already falling apart. Fame brought him money, fans, and attention, but it also magnified every bit of his pain. He'd disappear for days, cancel shows, and show up dazed on stage. His relationship with Courtney Love only added more fuel to the chaos, as the two became known for their heavy use. Attempts at rehab didn't stick, and friends watched helplessly as he slipped deeper into addiction. In 1994, at just 27 years old, Kurt's struggle ended in tragedy. His death shocked the world, marking the end of grunge's golden age and leaving fans questioning what could have saved him. Cobain's addiction was more than a rock and roll story. It was a tragedy of a man too sensitive for his own fame. Among heavy metal junkies, his story stands apart, not for how hard he lived, but for how much he felt. His pain gave birth to genius, but it also became the reason it couldn't last. Scott Weiland. Scott Weiland, the magnetic frontman of Stone Temple Pilots and later Velvet Revolver, was born to be a rock star, but his addiction made sure he never got to enjoy it for long. From the outside, Scott had everything: fame, money, talent, and a stage presence that could hypnotize any crowd. But behind that confident swagger, he was crumbling. Heroin became his escape early in his career, and it followed him like a shadow that refused to fade. Every time he found success, the addiction came roaring back to tear it down. In the 90s, he became one of heavy metal's most unpredictable junkies. He'd show up late to concerts, slur through interviews, or disappear completely. Bandmates tried to help, but his habit always won. Jail time, rehab, relapse. It was an endless loop. Even when he joined Velvet Revolver, fans could sense the chaos never left him. His voice remained hauntingly beautiful, but his body and mind were burning out fast. By the mid-2000s, Scott's career was hanging by a thread. He was fired, rehired, and fired again, each time slipping a little deeper into addiction. In 2015, the world got the news everyone feared. Scott Weiland was found dead on his tour bus, the result of a toxic mix of drugs. His story was tragic because he wasn't a villain or a rebel. He was an artist lost in his own pain, a man whose brilliance couldn't survive the battle raging inside him. Their stories remind us that addiction doesn't care how famous or talented you are. It destroys everything in its path. The stage lights fade, the applause dies down, and what's left is a human being trying to survive their own demons. Yet somehow, their music outlived their chaos, becoming a haunting reflection of what it costs to live fast and burn bright. So the next time you blast a heavy metal anthem, ask yourself how much of that fire came from talent and how much came from pain. If you want more untold stories from the wild side of rock and metal, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications.